It is raining the night Victor Hale marries someone who is not his wife. Not the woman who sat with him in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Atlanta when he had nothing. Not the woman who skipped Christmas with her own mother to help him close a deal that saved his first company. Not the woman who sold her grandmother's gold bracelet, the only thing she had left of her, just to keep the lights on in an office that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. No. Tonight, Victor stands at a gilded altar in a hall that cost more to rent for one evening than most people earn in a year. He is wearing a suit that costs $30,000. And in the back row, quiet as a shadow, sits Naomi Carter. No makeup. No entourage. No tears. Just a woman who knows something everyone else in that room does not. And when the priest asks the one question no one ever expects anyone to actually answer, is there anyone here who objects to this marriage? Naomi stands up. Slowly. Deliberately. And the entire room goes completely silent. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click the subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, to understand what happened in that room, and why what Naomi said next changed everything, you have to go back to the very beginning. Because this is not just a story about a man who left his wife. This is a story about what happens when a person forgets where they came from. When success quietly rewrites someone's memory. When the mirror becomes more important than the person standing right beside you. And this story is inspired by real events, real patterns of betrayal, real women who gave everything and were discarded, and real men who only understood loss when they were already drowning in it. Naomi Carter was born in Birmingham, Alabama, the second of 4 children. Her father worked nights at a steel plant. Her mother cleaned offices downtown. They were not poor in spirit, but they were poor in almost every other way. Naomi grew up understanding something most people have to be broken to learn, that love is not a feeling. Love is a decision you make every single day, even when it is hard, even when it is thankless, even when nobody is watching. She studied accounting on a partial scholarship. She was disciplined, brilliant, and deeply loyal. She met Victor Hale at 25 at a small church fundraiser in Atlanta. He was funny, ambitious, a little rough around the edges, but there was something in his eyes. A hunger. A drive. She saw it immediately. And she made a quiet decision that night that she would not fully understand for another 27 years. Victor Hale grew up in Savannah. His father left when he was 9. His mother raised him alone, working 2 jobs, and the memory of watching her exhaustion shaped everything about him, including his deepest fear, which was the fear of being nobody, of being invisible. He wanted to matter. He wanted people to look at him and see something important. That hunger was both his greatest strength and, as Naomi would eventually learn, his most dangerous flaw. When they married, Victor had a small construction consulting firm and about $12,000 in a savings account. Naomi had her accounting license and a job at a mid-sized firm downtown. They were building something together, and for a long time, that togetherness was real. The early years were hard in the way that only the early years of a real partnership can be hard. They shared one car. They ate rice and beans more nights than either of them cared to remember. Victor would come home defeated after a deal fell through, and Naomi would sit with him at the kitchen table, not with empty encouragement, but with a spreadsheet and a plan. She was the one who restructured their books when the business was hemorrhaging cash. She was the one who identified the tax credit that saved them $11,000 in their second year. She worked her full-time accounting job during the day and spent her nights doing Victor's bookkeeping. She once went 4 days without more than 3 hours of sleep because a city contract deadline and a tax filing overlapped, and she refused to let either one slip. She missed her best friend's wedding because Victor had a major presentation that weekend, and he needed her to prep the financial projections. She told her friend she was sorry. Her friend never fully forgave her. And Naomi carried that quietly because she believed, with everything she had, that the sacrifice was worth it. By the time Victor's company landed its first major government infrastructure contract, Naomi had quietly become the invisible engine of everything he built. She was not listed on the marketing materials. She was not in the press photos. She was the woman behind the curtain, structuring deals, catching errors, protecting assets, making sure that the empire Victor was building had a foundation that could actually hold weight. Victor knew this. In those early years, he said it openly. Naomi is the reason any of this works, he would tell people. And he meant it. Back then, he meant it. But money has a way of changing the air around a person. It does it slowly, the way fog moves. You do not notice it until you cannot see clearly anymore. Victor's company went from mid-size to major in the span of about 6 years. A series of well-timed real estate acquisitions in Atlanta, Charlotte, and Houston turned his construction consulting firm into a full-scale development empire. He was worth $40 million by the time he was 48. And somewhere in the space between 40 million and 400 million, which came faster than either of them expected, Victor Hale started to change in ways that were subtle at first, and then impossible to ignore. He started spending more time in rooms Naomi was not invited into. Not because she was excluded, exactly, but because the new world Victor was moving through had an unspoken dress code, and Naomi, brilliant, accomplished, plus-sized, natural, uninterested in performance, did not fit the aesthetic of the life Victor was now trying to project. He started making offhand comments. You should try that new trainer I hired. Maybe we could look at getting you something to wear for the gala, something more fitted. Small things. Quiet things. The kind of things that, on their own, might mean nothing, but stacked on top of each other over months and years, begin to feel like a verdict. And Naomi heard every single one. She did not respond the way most people might expect. She did not fight. She did not cry in front of him. She did not make ultimatums. Instead, she got very still. And she started paying close attention. Because Naomi Carter had spent 27 years learning to read the numbers underneath the numbers, and what she was reading now told her that something was shifting in a direction that could not be undone. Serena Vale entered Victor's life at a charity gala in Miami. She was 29 years old, and she moved through a room the way a spotlight moves, everything around her dimmed slightly just so she could be seen more clearly. She was an influencer with 2.3 million followers, a fashion line that ran mostly on aesthetics and very little substance, and an instinct for identifying wealthy men who were afraid of getting old. She spotted Victor across the room, and she made a calculation in about 30 seconds. He was rich. He was insecure. He was married to a woman he was already pulling away from. And he was desperately, achingly hungry to feel young again. She walked over. She laughed at his jokes. She told him he looked like he could be 40. And Victor Hale, a man who had built an empire, dissolved like sugar in warm water. Over the next 8 months, Victor changed in ways that even his closest business associates noticed. He started getting cosmetic treatments, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. He bought a sports car he had no real use for. He surrounded himself with younger men who flattered him and younger women who performed interest in him. He stopped attending the church they had been members of for 19 years. He stopped having dinner with Naomi. And when he was home, he was somewhere else entirely, scrolling through his phone, distracted, irritable, as though the house he had built with the woman beside him had become a cage he was desperate to escape. Naomi knew about Serena before Victor told her anything. She had known for months. Not because she snooped or hired anyone, but because she had always been the one managing the financial infrastructure of their life, and the numbers told stories that people sometimes forgot numbers could tell. Unusual transfers. Charges at hotels in cities Victor claimed to be in for business. A credit line opened quietly in his name alone. She sat with that knowledge for a long time, not in paralysis, but in preparation. Because Naomi Carter had not survived 27 years of building someone else's dream by being unprepared. The night Victor announced the divorce was the night that defined him, though not in the way he intended. It was a charity gala. One of those enormous, glittering events where Atlanta's elite gathered to write checks and be photographed. Naomi was there, standing near the silent auction table, wearing a deep burgundy dress she had bought for the occasion, when Victor walked up beside her and said, very quietly, very calmly, as though he were telling her the weather, I'm filing papers Monday. I think it's better if you hear it from me first. And then he walked away. Back into the crowd. Back into the light. And Naomi stood there alone, with a glass of sparkling water in her hand, and did not move for a very long time. People around her were laughing and clinking glasses and posing for photographs. And she just stood there, breathing. Now let me ask you something. Can you imagine that moment? Standing in a room full of people who have no idea your entire world just cracked open? Can you imagine what it would feel like to have given 27 years of your life, your youth, your sacrifices, your dreams to a person who tells you it is over while people are literally dancing 10 feet away? What would you do in that moment? Would you fall apart? Would you confront him? Or would you do what Naomi did, which was take one slow breath, set her glass down carefully, and walk out of that room with her head up? Because what happens next is where this story really begins. 3 weeks after the gala, Victor announced his engagement to Serena Vale. The tabloids loved it. Billionaire finds love again. Real estate king trades up. The headlines were cruel in the way that only indifferent people can be cruel, with complete casualness. Naomi's name appeared in a few of them, usually in phrases like his estranged wife or the previous Mrs. Hale, as though 27 years could be compressed into a subordinate clause. As though she were a footnote in a story she had largely written herself. But here is what the tabloids did not know. The night before the wedding, Naomi received an envelope at the quiet apartment she had rented in a modest neighborhood in Decatur. It was hand-delivered. No return address. Inside were financial documents, detailed, meticulous, damning. Account transfers. Shell company registrations. Asset movements that had been conducted without proper legal authorization. And a note, written in handwriting she did not recognize, that said simply, "He doesn't know what he's sitting on." But you do. Naomi sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours reading every page. And by the time she set the last document down, she was not angry. She was not sad. She was something far more powerful than either of those things. She was clear. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment right now with "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this shocking story. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit that button below so you never miss stories like this one. We drop new videos every week and trust us, you do not want to be late to the next one. What Victor Hale had never fully understood, because Naomi had never needed him to fully understand it, was that over the course of their marriage, she had been listed as a legal stakeholder in several of the foundational holding companies that underpinned his empire. It was not accidental. In the early years, when Victor's credit was weak and the business needed structural legitimacy, Naomi had been the one with the cleaner financial profile. She had been the one whose name had to go on certain documents. And as the empire grew, as layers of companies were built on top of other companies, those original ownership structures had never been fully dissolved or transferred. Which meant that Naomi Carter, quiet, composed, sidelined Naomi Carter, still legally controlled a significant portion of the foundation on which Victor's $400 million empire rested. She had known this for years. She had said nothing. Not because she was planning revenge, but because she had hoped, in the way that people hope for things they already sense are lost, that Victor would come back to himself. That he would remember who he was before the money. That he would look at her across a dinner table one evening and feel something real. But he never did. And so she had prepared. Quietly, carefully, and completely, the way she had always done everything. Back to that wedding hall. Back to the rain on the glass walls. Back to the moment the priest asked his question. When Naomi stood up, every head in that room turned toward her. Victor's face went completely still. Serena's hand tightened around her bouquet. And Naomi looked at the priest, not at Victor, not at Serena, and she said, in a voice that was calm enough to be frightening, "I don't object to this marriage. I just need Victor to understand what he's signing away before he signs anything else today." She reached into her bag, pulled out a single document, handed it to Victor's attorney, who was sitting in the second row. "My legal team has already been in contact with your firm," she said. "I thought today seemed like a good day to make sure everyone is on the same page." And then she sat back down. And she folded her hands in her lap. And she waited. The wedding continued. Victor and Serena were married. But the air in that room had changed in a way that could not be changed back. Victor's attorney was on his phone within 20 minutes of the ceremony ending. By the time the reception dinner was being served, Victor had stepped away from the table 3 times to take calls. Serena noticed. She smiled anyway for the cameras. But she noticed. The months that followed were, by most external measures, a disaster. Victor's legal team quickly confirmed what Naomi's filing had outlined, that several key holding entities in his corporate structure had ownership clauses that were now legally contested. 2 major investors, already nervous about the tabloid coverage and the optics of the divorce, began pulling back. A lawsuit from a former contractor, which had been quietly managed for years, suddenly gained new momentum when it emerged that the company's internal documentation had inconsistencies that Naomi, as a former insider, could speak to. Victor's new wife was spending at a rate that would have alarmed anyone with a financial background. But Victor no longer had anyone with a financial background in his corner. He had traded that for someone who knew how to look good in photographs. Meanwhile, Naomi had disappeared from the social circles that had once defined her life, and no one quite realized, at first, how busy she actually was. She was meeting with attorneys. She was consulting with financial advisors. She was building, with careful and deliberate intention, a foundation, not a corporate one this time, but a literal one. The Naomi Carter Foundation for Women's Financial Literacy launched quietly, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. It offered free accounting and financial planning workshops to women, particularly women who had spent years in supporting roles, managing households and businesses and other people's dreams, without ever being taught to build something of their own. The first cohort had 22 women. Within a year, it had over 300. Within 2 years, it had a waiting list. Victor found out about the foundation the way he found out about most things now, through someone else. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it at a dinner party. Victor looked it up on his phone that night, sitting alone in the dining room of his mansion while Serena was at an event he had not been invited to. He scrolled through the foundation's website for a long time. He looked at photographs of Naomi leading workshops. She looked different. Not physically. She looked lighter. Like a woman who had set down something very heavy and was only now beginning to feel what it was like to stand up straight. Serena Vale left Victor Hale 14 months after their wedding. She cited irreconcilable differences in her filing, which was the legal language for his empire was wobbling, the lifestyle had gotten complicated, and she had already identified her next opportunity. She took the settlement she was entitled to under their prenuptial agreement and moved to Los Angeles, where she relaunched her influencer brand as a reinvention journey. She gained 400,000 followers in the first 2 months. Victor watched this from the empty house in Buckhead that now felt less like a home and more like a monument to a version of himself he was not sure he had ever actually been. He called Naomi once. She did not answer. He left a voicemail. He said he was sorry. He said he had been afraid of getting old and he had taken that fear out on the person who deserved it least. He said he knew that was not enough. He was right. It was not enough. But it was, perhaps, the most honest thing he had said in years. Naomi listened to the voicemail once, sitting in her car outside the foundation's office building. Then she set her phone down on the passenger seat, stared out at the street for a moment, and went inside to teach her afternoon class. There is something that Victor Hale lost that cannot be recovered by any court filing or financial restructuring or late-night apology left on someone's voicemail. He lost the experience of being genuinely known by another person. He lost the quiet, enormous comfort of someone who remembered the man he was before anyone else saw him as significant. He lost Naomi, not just as a wife, not just as a financial partner, but as a witness. As someone who had watched him, believed in him, and chosen him every single day when choosing him cost something real. And he will spend the rest of his life in rooms full of people who are impressed by what he has, without ever truly understanding who he is. That is a particular kind of loneliness that money cannot fix. Because money is exactly how he got there. Victor Hale is still wealthy. His empire is smaller now, more fragile, held together by lawyers and restructured debt and people who work for him, but do not particularly care whether he succeeds. He attends events. He is photographed. He smiles in the way that people smile when they have learned that smiling is what is expected of them. And sometimes, late at night, in a house that is very large and very quiet, he picks up his phone and opens the Naomi Carter Foundation website. He does not know why. He never quite closes it all the way. He just looks at it. For a moment. And then he puts his phone face down on the nightstand and stares at the ceiling until he falls asleep. Now I want to ask you something directly. Because this story is not just about Victor and Naomi. It is about something most of us have either experienced or watched someone we love experience. Have you ever given your best years to someone fully, without holding anything back, and felt yourself becoming invisible to them the longer you stayed? Have you ever watched someone you love get intoxicated by success and forget the very people who helped them get there? And if you were Naomi, sitting in that back row with that document in your bag, would you have stood up? Or would you have let the wedding happen and walked away without a word? Tell us in the comments. Because your answer says something important about who you are. And what about Victor? Some people watching this will feel no sympathy for him at all. And that is fair. He humiliated a loyal woman in public. He chased something shallow and lost something irreplaceable. He made his bed. But others might see something more complicated, a man who is afraid, who made catastrophic choices driven by insecurity, and who will carry that regret for the rest of his life. Does that make him sympathetic? Does a person deserve forgiveness when they are genuinely sorry, even if the damage is done? We do not have a clean answer to that question. And maybe that is the point. Because real life rarely does. What we do know is this. Naomi Carter spent 27 years building someone else's dream. And then, in the wreckage of everything she had sacrificed, she found the space and the silence to finally build her own. She did not need Victor's apology to move forward. She did not need a courtroom victory or a tabloid redemption arc or a dramatic confrontation to feel whole. She just needed to remember, quietly and completely, who she had always been before she made his life the center of hers. And once she remembered, she never forgot again. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is not fight back. It is to stand up, say what needs to be said, and then walk, calmly, deliberately, and with everything that is truly yours out of the room. Naomi did not chase Victor. She did not beg him to remember her. She simply refused to disappear. And in doing so, she became more visible than she had ever been in 27 years of standing beside him. That is the thing about loyalty that people like Victor never quite understand until it is gone. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It just shows up, every single day, in the quiet work that no one notices until the work stops. And when it finally stops, when the person who is doing all of that quiet, invisible, essential work finally walks away, the silence they leave behind is deafening. Drop a comment right now. Would you forgive Victor if he came back to you, genuinely broken and sorry? Did Naomi wait too long to protect herself, or did she handle it exactly right? And most importantly, is there someone in your life right now who is doing for you what Naomi did for Victor? Someone whose quiet loyalty you might be taking for granted? Think about that. Really think about it. Because the most important lesson in this story is not what happened at that altar. It is what was happening every single quiet day for 27 years before it. And if you think that betrayal was painful to witness, stay right here. Because our next story is about a young maid who worked in a billionaire's household for 3 years, asking for nothing, expecting nothing, until one shocking night changed her life and his legacy forever. You do not want to miss that one. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and come back for our next story, because it is one you will not forget. We will see you there.